I want the estate, the business, everything, my brother barked, shoving the legal documents in my face while my parents nodded in agreement. For a decade, my parents believed I was their useless daughter. They never cared what I actually did for a living, only mocked me every time we met, saying, "No real job, no future." They thought they could erase me from the family legacy completely. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The papers were ready for me to sign away my rights, and my brother was already smiling at his victory. But their smug faces turned completely pale when the front door burst open. Just 10 minutes later, I knocked on their door with 2 police cars waiting outside, ready to tear their web of lies completely apart. My name is Clara Jameson. I am 35 years old, and until recently, my existence in the Whitaker family could be summed up in one word: invisible. For as long as I can remember, I lived in the suffocating shadow of my younger brother, Julian. To my parents, Julian was a golden god, a flawless financial prodigy who could do no wrong as he ran the family's real estate venture. I, on the other hand, was the eccentric outcast who sat in a dark room staring at lines of code. When I started my own boutique cybersecurity and digital forensics firm, my parents didn't celebrate. They scoffed. They labeled my passion as a useless hobby and treated my career as a running joke at family dinners. "When are you going to get a real corporate job, Clara?" my father would sneer, while my mother sighed in disappointment, adjusting the expensive jewelry Julian had bought her with real money. They never bothered to look past their own arrogance to see that my firm was actually quietly thriving, protecting high-profile clients from sophisticated digital threats. To them, I was just a failure with no future, an embarrassment to the family name who didn't deserve a seat at their prestigious table. But their blind adoration for their perfect son left them completely vulnerable to the storm that was about to hit them, a storm they never saw coming. The text from the manila folder sat heavily on the dining table, reflecting the harsh light of the crystal chandelier. My parents had summoned me to their high-end suburban estate under the pretense of a sudden family emergency, but the moment I stepped inside, the trap snapped shut. It wasn't an emergency. It was an ambush. Julian sat next to my father, a smug, satisfied grin plastered across his face, while my mother pushed a stack of legal waivers toward my plate. They were demanding that I sign away my entire share of Grandma Eleanor's estate, claiming it was for the stability of the family assets. As the argument escalated, a chilling realization hit me. The house was dead quiet, and the one person who always protected me was missing. "Where is Grandma?" I demanded. My mother waved her hand dismissively, her voice dripping with synthetic sympathy. "Oh, Clara, her cognitive decline has gotten so much worse. We had to move her to the back guest house for her own safety. She barely recognizes anyone now." Before they kicked me out for refusing to sign their predatory paperwork, my father allowed me a brief, supervised 2-minute goodbye with her in the guest house. Grandma Eleanor sat in her armchair looking frail, but as I hugged her, her eyes flared with intense clarity. She leaned in close, squeezing my hand with surprising strength, and slipped a hand-knitted bookmark into my coat pocket. "Keep it safe, Clara," she whispered urgently. Back in my car, I pulled it out. Knitted into the fabric was a bizarre hidden sequence: 0419192018051919. I sat alone in the dim interior of my car, the engine idling as the headlights cut through the heavy darkness of the driveway. My heart was pounding, but the moment my fingers brushed against that hand-knitted bookmark, my professional instincts as a digital forensics investigator took over. Grandma Eleanor wasn't suffering from dementia. She was a woman trying to communicate through a wall of silence. I turned on my laptop, the screen illuminating the dark dashboard, and stared at the bizarre sequence of numbers: 041919201805191919. 2018051919. It didn't take long for my mind to crack it. It was a classic, basic alphanumeric substitution cipher where each number corresponded directly to a position in the alphabet. A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. I quickly mapped out the digits on my screen. 4 was D, 19 was S, 20 was T. The letters spelled out a single terrifying word, DISTRESS. My breath hitched. But Grandma hadn't just left me a word. Flushed against the bottom edge of the fabric was a second, tiny row of stitched numbers that looked exactly like a local network IP address pointing to a specific server. She knew exactly what I did for a living, even if my parents refused to acknowledge it. Using my cellular hotspot, I immediately launched a secure network scanner to intercept the signal coming from the main house. Within minutes, I breached their private home server, bypassing their laughably weak security protocols. What I found inside made my blood run cold. Julian had completely isolated Grandma's wing, installing digital signal jammers and a heavily restricted firewall that blocked her personal phone from making any external calls or sending regular text messages. She was a digital prisoner in her own home, trapped in an open loop of danger, and I was the only one who knew. The digital matrix of their private server unraveled on my screen, exposing a sickening reality. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I dove deeper into the encrypted directories Julian had hidden away. As a cybersecurity specialist, I see financial fraud every day, but discovering it within your own family hits like a physical blow. I struck absolute gold when I bypassed a hidden folder labeled under a dummy corporate name. Inside were the true, unedited financial statements of the family's real estate venture. Julian's reputation as a flawless financial prodigy was an absolute myth. His high-end lifestyle was funded by a massive bleeding deficit. He had systematically embezzled over $1.5 million from Grandma Eleanor's personal cash trust to pay off his own failing investments and secret debts. But the financial theft wasn't even the worst part. I uncovered a series of scanned medical authorizations and private emails between Julian and a crooked local clinic. The timeline was damning. The moment Grandma Eleanor had started questioning the missing funds from her accounts, my parents and Julian had conspired to silence her. They had been secretly administering heavy, unprescribed chemical sedatives into her daily meals, intentionally inducing artificial confusion to fake severe dementia. They were fabricating a medical narrative to force an immediate power of attorney transfer, which would allow Julian to legally liquidate the rest of her millions before she could expose him. The very daughter they had relentlessly mocked for a decade as completely useless was now the ultimate digital executioner, holding the exact forensic keys to their absolute destruction. They had no idea their perfect web of lies was about to be entirely torn apart. I didn't waste a single second. Clutching my laptop containing the ironclad forensic evidence of elder abuse, wire fraud, and grand larceny, I immediately contacted the authorities and bypassed the standard reporting channels to alert a specialized digital crimes unit and adult protective services. Just 10 minutes after discovering the true depth of their cruelty, I was standing on their pristine front porch, my heart hammering against my ribs, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers and an emergency social worker. I didn't knock softly. I struck the heavy wood with authority, demanding immediate entry. When my father opened the door, his smug, dominant expression instantly dissolved into sheer panic. He tried to stonewall us, stammering about family privacy, but the officers pushed past his weak protests, presenting an emergency search warrant backed by my data. We marched directly through the main house and out to the secluded back guest house. When we breached the door, the scene was heartbreaking but vindicating. Grandma Eleanor was sitting up in bed, fully alert, holding a tiny burner phone she had managed to keep hidden from her captors. The heavy sedatives had begun to wear off, and her mind was sharp, focused, and entirely ready to testify. As the officers began documenting the scene and securing the physical evidence of the illegal medication, my parents and Julian stood trapped in the hallway, completely paralyzed by the sudden, brutal realization that their useless daughter had just brought their entire criminal empire crashing down around them. Months later, the family faced their ultimate public reckoning inside a cold, marble courtroom. The grand illusion of my brother's perfect life dissolved entirely under the weight of the digital forensics I presented to the judge. Instead of me losing my inheritance and being erased from the family history, Julian was stripped of every asset he owned and faced severe criminal charges for grand larceny, elder abuse, and wire fraud. My parents, who had spent a decade treating me like an embarrassment, were exposed as complicit accessories to his crimes. Their reputation in the community was completely destroyed, and they were left entirely broke, facing imminent financial ruin from Julian's mounting legal debts and failed schemes. The turning point came when the judge officially threw out the fraudulent power of attorney and validated Grandma Eleanor's real, final will. The entire family trust, valued at over $4 million, was placed under my absolute control, along with the full legal guardianship of my grandmother. The dynamic had completely and beautifully flipped. As the hearing concluded, the very parents who had relentlessly mocked me stood outside the courtroom doors, tears streaming down their faces, openly begging their useless daughter for financial mercy and a place to live. I looked at them, remembering the years of exclusion and the predatory waivers they had tried to force upon me, and realized that true justice isn't just about winning. It's about watching the people who tried to destroy you realize exactly how much they underestimated you. 3 months later, I sat at my new desk in a beautiful, sunlit coastal office overlooking the Pacific Ocean. My cybersecurity firm was thriving more than ever, now fully funded and expanded, protecting vulnerable clients from the exact type of digital exploitation I had undetected in my own family. Grandma Eleanor lived peacefully in a charming cottage just a few blocks away, her health completely restored, her mind sharp, and her days filled with the quiet dignity she deserved. The heavy burden of trying to prove my worth to people who never valued me had finally lifted, replaced by the profound peace of accountability only to myself. My parents and Julian had made their choices, and now they had to live with the consequences of their greed. What they believed was a useless daughter had become the shield that saved our family legacy. Now, I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if your own family turned their backs on you for money? Have you ever been through something similar? Let me know in the comments below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.